She left a note with flowers, not knowing she would be found by the millionaire who would love her. That was the headline I, Layla Carpenter, never imagined I would write about my own life. But let me tell you how it all began. On that day when my life changed completely because of a simple misunderstanding that fate orchestrated with the mastery worthy of the best romance novels that Grandma Rose used to read aloud on her front porch. It was a rainy Tuesday in March in Pensacola, one of those days when the Gulf Coast gets moody and the smell of salt air mixed with rain takes over the entire city. I had woken up determined to find a new place for my weekly food column, something that would escape the obvious tourist route that all the travel blogs had already explored to exhaustion. Peaches, my orange Persian cat, watched me from the window of my apartment downtown with that feline expression of superiority that clearly said, "There goes the human again, chasing her culinary adventures." Claire had recommended Mama Lou's Kitchen, a hidden corner on Government Street that served, according to her, the best shrimp and grits I've ever tasted in my life. And trust me, I've eaten shrimp in a lot of exotic places. As a travel photographer, my best friend had culinary credentials that I deeply respected. But when I arrived at the location, a small Victorian house painted mint green with only 6 tables and walls covered with old photos of Pensacola, I thought maybe she had gotten carried away with excitement. Mama Lou herself came to serve me, a woman of about 60 with a warm smile and a floral apron that seemed to have come out of a southern painting. "First time here, honey?" she asked, and when I confirmed, her eyes sparkled. "Then you're gonna try my specialty. Shrimp and grits with andouille, sausage, cornbread, and my secret sauce. It's my great-grandmother's recipe, who came here from Louisiana in the 1920s. While waiting for the dish, I observed the movement of the small restaurant. At the next table, a man in a dark suit was talking quietly on the phone about scent profiles and international fragrance markets, gesturing elegantly with his hands. He had that type of presence you notice even without wanting to. Broad shoulders, striking profile, and a watch that even from afar I recognized as extremely expensive. Probably another businessman closing deals during lunch, I thought, returning my attention to the book I had brought. When Mama Lou placed the plate in front of me, I literally forgot to breathe. The aroma rising from those shrimp seasoned with herbs I didn't even know existed was enough to make anyone cry with emotion. The first bite was a revelation, an explosion of flavors that transported me directly to somewhere between heaven and the grandmother's kitchen I never had. The grits were creamy in just the right measure, and the cornbread added a texture that transformed each bite into an almost mystical experience. I finished the dish in religious silence, genuine tears streaming down my face. It wasn't just food. It was edible art. It was history served on a plate. It was love transformed into seasoning. As a food journalist, I had already tasted dishes in internationally awarded restaurants, but nothing had touched me as deeply as that simple meal in a forgotten corner of downtown. So moved by the experience, I felt I needed to express my gratitude in a special way. I took a sheet from my notebook and wrote by hand, "Thank you for reminding me that magical moments still exist in this world. Your food touched my soul in a way that words cannot express. A meal like this reconnects us with our humanity and reminds us why life is worth living. With eternal admiration, a lover of good food." I folded the paper carefully and quickly left to buy flowers at Emma's flower stand on the corner of Palafox Street. "Want gardenias, honey?" offered the florist, a thin woman with a gap-toothed smile who knew everyone downtown. "They're fragrant today, fresh from Mobile." I chose the whitest and most perfumed ones, tied them with a blue ribbon she gave me as a gift, and ran back to the restaurant before losing my nerve. "Please," I asked the waiter, a young man of about 20 who seemed more interested in his phone, "deliver this to whoever's responsible for the kitchen." "It's a special thank you." He nodded distractedly, took my note with the flowers, and I left the restaurant with a warm heart from gratitude and the certainty that I had experienced something special. What I didn't know was that at that exact moment, Joel Macmillan, CEO of Essence Luxe and one of the most coveted bachelors in Pensacola, was finishing his meeting at Table 5 with natural essence suppliers for his new line of perfumes inspired by Gulf Coast aromas. His company, which had started as a small artisanal laboratory inherited from his grandfather, the perfumer, now made millions exporting fragrances throughout North America and dreamed of European expansion. Joel had chosen that discreet restaurant precisely to escape the curious looks that always followed him in the more trendy places in the city. At 33, he was the type of man who appeared in society columns even when trying to go unnoticed. Dark hair, always perfectly styled, honey-colored eyes that seemed to see beyond people's surface, and a natural charm that combined sophistication with genuine humility inherited from Grandpa Sebastian. The waiter, confused between tables and still thinking about the message he had received from his girlfriend, delivered my note to Joel when he asked for the check. "For you, sir," he said simply, placing the folded paper and flowers on the table before quickly walking away. Joel was intrigued. He wasn't expecting any message, and certainly not expecting flowers. He carefully opened the paper and read the words I had written with such emotion. Something strange happened in his chest, a feeling of recognition that didn't make logical sense. Who was this mysterious woman who talked about magical moments and touched souls? Why did those simple words affect him so deeply? He kept the note in his shirt pocket, along with one of the gardenia flowers, feeling an inexplicable connection with that stranger who could see poetry in a plate of shrimp and grits. Throughout the entire drive back to the company, Joel couldn't stop thinking about those words. A lover of good food. Who could she be? That night, in his luxury penthouse on Pensacola Bay, Joel showed the note to Duke, his French bulldog who followed him everywhere like a furry and stubborn bodyguard. "What do you think, buddy?" he asked, sitting in the Italian leather armchair while observing the Gulf through the glass wall. "Do you believe in coincidences of destiny?" Duke barked once as if approving the idea, and Joel smiled. Maybe it was crazy, but something told him that note had reached him for some special reason. The next day, I woke up with a terrible emotional hangover, not from alcohol, but from the intensity of what I had experienced at Mama Lou's kitchen. Peaches meowed insistently, probably judging my melodramatic state while I tried to transform the experience into words for my column. How to explain to readers that a simple dish had made me cry with emotion without seeming completely crazy. Claire arrived at my apartment at 10 in the morning, loaded with photographic equipment and with that mischievous smile that meant trouble. "Layla, you forgot we have the food tour today?" My stomach dropped. The tour with Dr. Vincent Albright, the eccentric historian who guided the best culinary routes in the city. I had signed up a week before for a special article about culinary tourism, but had completely forgotten after the emotional intensity of the previous day. "Claire, I'm not prepared for this today," I protested, still in pajamas and with messy hair. "I need to process yesterday's experience before diving into more culinary adventures." But my friend was already choosing clothes in my closet with the determination of someone who doesn't accept excuses. "Layla Carpenter, you're going to get ready right now. Dr. Vincent doesn't accept delays, and you know this article could open important doors for your career." She was right, as always. My work as a freelance journalist required that I take advantage of every opportunity, even when my emotional state was more confused than a baby's hair. An hour later, I was running through the brick streets of downtown, late and with my camera banging uncomfortably against my side. The meeting point was at the historic Pensacola village, where Dr. Vincent was already explaining the history of Spanish colonization to a small group of tourists and local curious people when I tripped spectacularly at the entrance. My camera flew toward the concrete floor, making a terrible noise that echoed throughout the market. "Great start to the article, Layla," I murmured to myself, imagining the damage and mentally calculating how much the repair would cost. But then a firm hand caught my camera in the air, saving it from certain death. "Are you okay?" asked a deep, velvety voice that made me look up immediately, and that's when my world stopped completely. The man who had saved my camera was, without any exaggeration, the most beautiful creature I had contemplated in my 27 years of existence on this planet. Dark hair, with some rebellious waves that suggested he had run his hands through it recently, honey-colored eyes that seemed to have been drawn by some Renaissance artist obsessed with perfection, and a smile that could disarm any woman within a 15-mile radius without much effort. "Joel," he introduced himself simply, extending his hand to help me up. "I work in cosmetics." The most adorable lie by omission that Joel Macmillan had ever told in his life, but something about my almond eyes, still wet from the near cry over the camera, made him want to be just an ordinary man for a few precious hours. "Layla," I managed to respond, trying not to look completely dazzled while he checked if my camera had suffered any damage. His hands were elegant, with long fingers that handled the equipment with almost reverent care. "Food journalist," I added, in a pathetic attempt to sound professional after the embarrassment of the triumphal entrance. Dr. Vincent Albright, our guide with a greying beard and contagious enthusiasm, interrupted our moment with theatrical clapping. "Very well, my dear gastronomic explorers. Now that everyone has arrived, some with more drama than others," he said, winking at me, "let's begin our journey through the flavors that tell the story of Pensacola." The group was small, just 6 people besides me and Joel. There was a couple of tourists from Atlanta, an influencer blogger who wouldn't stop photographing everything for Instagram, and an elegant lady who introduced herself as a retired history teacher. Joel naturally stayed by my side, as if we had already agreed, and I tried to ignore how incredibly good he smelled. A mixture of sandalwood, something citrusy, and a note that vaguely reminded me of gardenia. "Gulf Coast cuisine," declared Dr. Vincent theatrically as we walked to the first stop, "is like an epic romance, sweet, spicy, full of surprises and always leaving you wanting more. Each dish tells a story of unlikely encounters between cultures, just as each person we meet can completely change our personal narrative." Joel laughed, a deep, genuine sound that made me want to hear it again immediately, and whispered in my ear, "Is he always this philosophical, or is he trying to impress the group?" I felt a shiver run down my spine with his proximity. "Always," I whispered back. "Dr. Vincent believes that food and philosophy are inseparable. You'll get used to it, or you'll run away." Our first stop was Joe's Seafood Shack at the Pensacola Beach Boardwalk, famous throughout the city for serving the best fried oysters on the Gulf. Joe was an imposing man of about 50, with strong arms from someone who works with food his whole life, and a smile that lit up his entire face when he talked about his dishes. "These oysters here," he explained with pride, showing the golden pieces crispy on the outside and tender inside, "are harvested fresh from Apalachicola Bay, seasoned with spices I learned from my grandmother, and a special touch I don't tell anyone." "Doctor," Vincent approached like a determined investigator. "Come on, Joe. After 15 years of friendship, you're not going to give me even a hint?" "Vincent Albright, you know very well that family secrets aren't told even to the priest," he retorted, laughing and serving a generous portion to each of us. "But I can guarantee that whoever eats my oysters never forgets the taste." It was there that the first epic disaster of our gastronomic journey happened. Trying to be elegant while tasting the shrimp that Joe had served as an accompaniment, I managed the feat of spilling the red-orange sauce directly on my favorite white blouse, the one I had bought on sale and considered my lucky piece for important interviews. "Perfect," I sighed, looking at the stain that spread across the fabric like an involuntary abstract artwork. Now I look like a walking Pollock painting, just in the Gulf Coast version. Tears of frustration began to form in my eyes, not just because of the ruined blouse, but because I wanted to make a good impression on that beautiful man who had appeared out of nowhere in my life. Joel, noticing my genuine despair, tried to console me in the only way his aristocratic education allowed him. He decided to taste the whole jalapeno pepper that accompanied the dish, in a chivalrous attempt to divert attention from my embarrassing situation. The result was worthy of a 90s romantic comedy movie. His honey-colored eyes immediately began to water, his face turned red as a ripe tomato, and I could see practically flames coming out of his mouth, but he tried to maintain the pose of sophisticated businessman even while his tongue was obviously on fire. It's delicious, he lied heroically, while small drops of sweat formed on his forehead. I exploded in laughter. Not a polite little laugh from a well-behaved lady, but a genuine laugh. One of those that comes from deep in the belly and infects everyone around. "You don't need to pretend you're okay," I said between laughs. "Your face is redder than my destroyed blouse." And it was exactly there, in that moment of shared vulnerability, that something fundamental changed between us two. Joel completely dropped the pose, laughed at himself genuinely, and asked Joe for help. "Please, is there anything that cuts the heat? Milk? Ice cream, anything that saves my tongue from spontaneous combustion?" Joe appeared with a glass of cold milk and an amused maternal expression. "Boy, we warned that the jalapeno is strong, but you two are stubborn and want to act tough." He observed us with that perceptive look of someone who has seen a lot in life. "You make a pretty couple, I must say." During the next 4 hours and 5 gastronomic stops, we discovered we had much more in common than any statistical coincidence should allow. At Donna Maria's Cheese Grits, Joel told me he had lost his mother at 15, the same age I was when my mother died in a car accident. At the Key Lime Pie from Sunset Cafe, we discovered we both had temperamental cats, he with Duke, a French bulldog he insisted on calling a cat out of stubbornness, me with Peaches, who really was a cat but acted like a despotic empress. At the Gumbo from Creole Corner, Joel revealed his passion for artisanal perfumes and told about the grandfather who had initiated him in the art of creating fragrances. "Each perfume tells a story," he explained, absently touching his shirt pocket where he kept something I couldn't identify. "My grandfather always said that smell is the heart's memory, that scents transport us to specific moments in our lives in a way no other sense can." I told him about my dreams of writing a book about unlikely encounters around the world, about how I believed food had the magical power to connect completely different people in shared experiences of pleasure and discovery. "You know that feeling when you taste something that touches your soul?" I asked, remembering the overwhelming experience of the previous day at Mama Lou's kitchen. "Like what?" Joel asked, sudden curiosity shining in his eyes. "Sometimes we eat something that goes beyond taste," I explained, gesticulating with my hands while trying to translate the almost mystical sensation into words. "It's as if the dish carries all the history of who prepared it, all the love and care invested there. You feel a connection with something greater, you understand?" Joel touched his pocket unconsciously. "I understand perfectly. Sometimes the universe uses the most unexpected means to show us something important, to connect us with people who will change our lives." He looked at me in an intense way that made my stomach do strange things, like a note left by chance or a casual encounter at a market. I had no idea he was talking literally about us two, but I felt a strange sensation of familiarity, as if I already knew that man from somewhere my conscious mind couldn't identify. Claire, who had photographed us discreetly throughout the tour with the mastery of someone who documents special moments without interrupting their natural magic, approached me when we stopped for coffee in the late afternoon. "Layla," she whispered conspiratorially in my ear, "this man is completely enchanted by you, and by my photographic calculations, which never fail, the feeling is absolutely reciprocal." "Claire, stop making things up," I murmured back, but felt my face heat up. "We just met this morning. Friend, I've been working capturing genuine connections for over 10 years. You two have a chemistry that practically glows in the photos." She discreetly showed me the camera screen, where Joel and I appeared laughing together while he delicately cleaned the sauce from my blouse. "Look at this, and tell me it's not pure magic happening." When the tour finally ended in the late afternoon, with the sun painting downtown that golden color that only exists in Pensacola, Joel walked me to where Claire had parked the car. We walked slowly, like two people who don't want the moment to end, talking about everything and nothing at the same time. "Layla," he said when we reached the car, running his hand through his hair in that unconscious gesture I was already finding adorable. "I know we just met, and I know it might seem a bit bold on my part, but would you like to see my perfume workshop tomorrow? It's nothing grand," he lied shamelessly, "just a hobby I inherited from my grandfather. But I have the feeling you would understand the poetry behind fragrances." My heart raced, as if I had just run a marathon. "I'd love to," I replied, trying to sound casual despite the butterflies doing acrobatics in my stomach. "What time?" "How about 10 in the morning? I can pick you up if you want." We exchanged phone numbers with that solemn ceremony of those who know they're crossing an important line, and I got into Claire's car with wobbly legs and a racing heart. "So?" Claire asked before I even closed the door completely. "So what?" I tried to play dumb, but was already smiling like a lovesick teenager. "Layla Carpenter, you're radiant, literally radiant. I haven't seen you like this since, well, I've never seen you like this." She started the car but continued analyzing me through the rearview mirror. "And he invited you to see his workshop? Girl, that's practically a marriage proposal by modern male standards." We spent the rest of the trip talking about Joel, analyzing every word, every look, every gesture we had exchanged during the day. When I got home, Peaches received me with that feline expression of superiority that clearly said, "Where have you been all day, and why do you smell like an unknown man?" That night, lying in my bed with Peaches purring possessively on my chest, I couldn't stop thinking about Joel. There was something familiar about him, something that made me feel as if I already knew him from somewhere impossible to identify. And stranger still, I felt as if my life was about to change completely, as if that chance encounter at the market was the beginning of something much bigger than I could imagine. Joel's hobby revealed itself to be the most adorable and monumental lie I had ever witnessed when I arrived at the address he had given me the next morning. The building was a spectacular tower on Pensacola Bay, with panoramic views of the Gulf and modern architecture that screamed money in all languages known to humanity. The doorman treated me with the deference reserved for important people, and the private elevator that took me directly to the top floor was more luxurious than some entire apartments I had visited. When the doors opened, I was literally speechless. The space was stunning, floor-to-ceiling glass walls, offering a 360-degree view of the city and Gulf, Carrara marble countertops filled with hundreds of glass bottles containing essences of all imaginable colors, and a laboratory that looked more like a science fiction movie set, only dedicated entirely to the art of perfumery. "This is just a hobby?" I managed to ask, mouth agape, while slowly walking through what was obviously one of the most sophisticated fragrance laboratories I had ever seen, and I had visited some impressive places for my articles. Joel appeared from the integrated American kitchen, scratching his neck with that shy way that was already becoming my new dangerous addiction. He wore a simple grey t-shirt and jeans, but somehow managed to look elegant even in casual clothes. "Okay, maybe it's a slightly elaborate hobby," he admitted, and that's when Duke made his triumphal entrance. The cutest French bulldog in the universe came running toward me as if we were old friends separated by years of distance, barking animatedly and practically knocking over a side table in his excitement. "Duke, no!" shouted Joel, but it was too late. The dog had decided to officially steal me. "Hi, handsome," I said, crouching to receive the enthusiastic licks. "You must be the famous Duke." The dog seemed to immediately approve of my presence, spinning in circles and making those guttural sounds of contentment that bulldogs make when they're extremely happy. "He never reacts like this to strangers," commented Joel, obviously surprised. "Usually Duke is quite selective about the people he lets into his territory. Animals have always loved me," I explained, scratching behind Duke's ears. My cat Peaches says it's because I have compatible energy, which in feline language means I serve food on time and don't bother too much. Joel laughed in that genuine way that made me want to hear the sound again immediately. Duke has similar criteria, but Ads must like long walks on the beach and needs to tolerate nighttime snoring that shakes the building structure. That's when he picked up a bouquet of white gardenias that was on the main counter, flowers identical to those I had bought the day before to accompany my note at Mama Lo's kitchen. "For you," he said simply. "I thought it would match your personality." Duke, apparently interpreting this as an invitation to play, decided to steal my bouquet at the exact moment I extended my hand to take it. In a move worthy of an action movie, the dog grabbed the flowers in his mouth and ran off across the penthouse as if he had just pulled off the heist of the century. "Duke, come back here now!" shouted Joel, running after the fugitive who was clearly having immense fun with the situation. "He doesn't usually do this, I swear." I exploded in laughter, chasing both of them around the luxurious penthouse, while Duke ran between the ornamental plants, the Italian leather sofa, and the dining table that probably cost more than my annual salary. The scene was absolutely surreal, a millionaire CEO chasing a flower thief bulldog, while I laughed so hard I could barely breathe. "Duke, you're making me look bad in front of Layla," Joel pleaded when we finally managed to corner the criminal behind the gourmet grill on the balcony. "Give back the flowers and let's talk like civilized adults." The dog, proud of his feat, dropped the bouquet at my feet and sat with that expression of total satisfaction that only dogs can display after causing maximum chaos. The flowers were a bit crushed, but still fragrant and beautiful. "Thank you, Duke," I said, petting his head. "You have a special talent for dramatic deliveries." While Joel profusely apologized for his four-legged son's behavior, I took the opportunity to better observe the space around us. There were photographs on the walls showing Joel at business events, awards ceremonies, and what appeared to be international business trips. An entire shelf was dedicated to books about perfumery, organic chemistry, and the history of fragrances. But what caught my attention most were the artisanal bottles with handwritten labels and dates going back decades. "These are my grandfather Sebastian's creations," explained Joel, following my gaze. His voice became softer, loaded with affection and nostalgia. He was an incredible artisanal perfumer, learned the art from a Frenchman who came to Florida in the 1940s. Each bottle here tells a different story. He carefully picked up a small bottle with amber liquid and a faded label. "Mermaid's Whisper, 1987. Grandpa created this fragrance inspired by a love story he heard from an old fisherman in Destin. They say the perfume has the power to reunite soulmates separated by destiny." "Your grandfather sounds like he was an incurable romantic," I commented, carefully touching the bottle. He really was. He always said that each perfume needed to have a soul, a story that connected whoever wore it with something transcendent. Joel looked at me with an intensity that made my stomach do those strange things again. "My grandfather always said that smell is the heart's memory, that scents instantly transport us to specific moments in our lives in a way no other sense can." We spent the entire morning creating my own personal fragrance. Joel guided me through dozens of different essences: orange blossom that reminded me of childhood at Grandma Rose's house, sandalwood that brought memories of incense burning at the historic church, bourbon vanilla that evoked birthday cakes and happy afternoons. "Now, it needs something that's uniquely yours," he said, studying the notes we had selected. "Something that captures your essence, Layla Carpenter." He picked up a small bottle of gardenia essence. "How about this?" The smell instantly transported me to the previous day, to the moment when I chose the flowers at Emma's stand. "Perfect," I whispered, and Joel smiled as if he had just deciphered an important mystery. While our fragrance rested for the notes to integrate, we sat on the balcony overlooking the Gulf, drinking chilled white wine that Joel had taken from a wine cellar that was probably worth more than my entire apartment. Duke napped at our feet, finally satisfied after his morning artistic performance. "Tell me about your family," asked Joel, leaning back in the wicker chair and observing me with that total attention that made me feel like the only person in the universe. I told him about my parents, my mother Helena, a literature teacher who taught me to love words, and my father Albert, a naval engineer from whom I inherited stubbornness and sense of justice. I talked about Ryan, my overprotective brother, who still thought I needed signed permission to date someone, and about Grandma Rose, who at 78 continued to be the wisest and most dramatic woman I knew. "And you?" I asked. "What's it like being Joel Macmillan beyond fragrances?" He was quiet for a moment, looking at the gulf. "Sometimes it's lonely," he finally admitted. "People always want something from me. A partnership, an investment, an invitation to some event. It's hard to know who really likes Joel and who's interested in the CEO of Essence Luxe." "That must be complicated," I agreed, finally understanding why he had lied about his profession the day before. "That's why I lied yesterday," he confessed, as if reading my thoughts. "I wanted you to know me for who I am, not for what I have. I wanted our connection to be real." Our conversations became progressively more intimate as the hours passed. Joel told me about the constant pressure to expand the family empire, about how sometimes he felt he was living the life others had planned for him. I shared my struggle to be taken seriously as a food journalist in a male-dominated field, about my dreams of writing a book that really mattered. "You know what impresses me most about you," said Joel, when the sun was already setting, painting the sky orange and pink. "It's that you see poetry in details that most people ignore. Like that note someone left at a restaurant yesterday, pure magic, transformed into simple words." My heart almost stopped beating. "What note?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual despite the growing panic. Joel smiled mysteriously and touched his shirt pocket. "A lover of good food wrote something about magical moments that touch the soul. I kept it because it moved me in a strange way, you know? As if those words had been written specifically for me to find." I was completely dry-mouthed. That was my note that had been delivered to him by mistake. Joel had connected with me through my own words before even meeting me personally. It was too surreal to be coincidence. Can I see the note?" I asked, my voice coming out weaker than I'd like. He carefully took the now slightly yellowed paper from his pocket, along with the dried gardenia flower that still maintained a faint perfume. I immediately recognized my handwriting, my words, my emotion crystallized in that piece of paper. I was about to reveal the truth, my heart beating so hard I was sure he could hear it, when the elevator bell rang, interrupting our moment with the subtlety of a jackhammer in operation. Camilla Brooks, Joel's elegant secretary, stepped out of the elevator with a worried expression that immediately changed the entire atmosphere of the environment. "Joel, sorry to interrupt," she said, greeting me politely before returning her attention to him. "But Luna Carter is in the lobby. She insists she needs to talk to you urgently about tomorrow's charity event." The name Luna hit Joel like lightning. All the relaxation and intimacy we had built during the day evaporated instantly, replaced by palpable tension that made even Duke lift his head, alert. "Tell her I'm busy," Joel responded dryly. "She said she won't leave until she talks to you. She's causing a certain situation in the lobby." Camilla looked embarrassed. "The other residents are starting to complain." Joel sighed heavily, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Okay, send her up. But you stay here too, Camilla. I don't want to be alone with her." I felt a knot form in my stomach. Who was this Luna who caused this reaction in Joel, and why did I suddenly feel like something very bad was about to happen? A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened again, and Luna Carter made her triumphal entrance. She was exactly the type of woman who always made me question all my life choices. Platinum blonde, with perfectly arranged highlights, sculptural body wrapped in a white dress that probably cost more than my 3-month salary, and expensive perfume that reached us even before she completely stepped out of the elevator. "Darling," she purred, completely ignoring my presence and walking directly to Joel with the confidence of someone who still thought she had rights over him. She kissed his face more lingeringly than necessary, leaving a subtle lipstick mark that made my blood boil. "Luna," said Joel, visibly uncomfortable and discreetly moving away from her. "This is Layla, a journalist doing an article about artisanal perfumes." The words "a journalist" hurt more than he'd like to admit, especially after all the intimacy we had shared. "Oh, how interesting," said Luna, analyzing me from head to toe with that type of smile women use when marking territory. "Joel is really an expert on the subject. We worked so intimately together for so long, developing various fragrances." The sentence hung in the air, loaded with insinuations that made me want to disappear. "Luna, what do you want?" Joel asked directly, his patience visibly running out. "We need to settle the last details for tomorrow's charity dinner," she said, pulling up a chair and sitting as if she owned the place. "Our table, the special menu we ordered, the presentation of the new perfumes." Each "our" and "we" was like a small stab to my chest. I felt completely out of place, like an intruder in an intimate theatre play of which I didn't know the script. Joel wasn't denying the "our," wasn't making clear what exactly was the nature of their relationship, and my insecurity began to grow like a poisonous plant. "Layla, maybe it's better we continue this another day," said Joel, avoiding my gaze. "Luna and I have some business matters to resolve." The words were like a slap in the face. After all the intimacy we had shared, all the connection I thought we had built, he was basically dismissing me in front of the ex-girlfriend. "Of course," I managed to say, trying to maintain a minimum of dignity while picking up my purse. "Thank you for the educational afternoon." Duke came to me, as if sensing my sadness, and I petted him one last time. "Layla, wait," Joel began to say, but Luna immediately interrupted him. "Darling, we don't have much time. The event is tomorrow, and there's still so much to settle." I left that penthouse with a broken heart and a growing certainty that I had completely deluded myself about Joel and what had happened between us. Maybe I was just a temporary distraction, just any journalist he had used to pass time while resolving his problems with his ex-girlfriend. In the elevator, I looked at the crushed gardenia bouquet I still held and felt tears beginning to form. How had I been so naive? The Pensacola Chamber of Commerce charity dinner was officially being the most elegant social nightmare of my life. I had accepted Joel's invitation against all my self-preservation instincts after Claire spent 2 hours convincing me I was being paranoid about Luna and shouldn't waste such a special connection because of insecurity. "Layla, you look absolutely stunning in this navy blue dress," my best friend had said while touching up my makeup. "And more importantly, that man is completely in love with you. Don't let his ex-girlfriend destroy something so beautiful before it even really begins." But now, sitting at table 12 between Joel and Luna, I felt like a supporting actress in a dramatic play I didn't know the script for, wearing a borrowed costume that didn't fit me right. The event hall was decorated with white orchids and gold, soft lighting that should have been romantic but only managed to highlight how out of place I was in that high society environment. Luna was absolutely stunning in an emerald green dress that perfectly matched her eyes and probably cost more than my journalism degree. She didn't miss a single opportunity to recall intimate moments she had shared with Joel, each sentence carefully calculated to make me feel like an intruder. "Joel, remember when we traveled to France and you taught me to distinguish the base notes of French perfumes?" she said, delicately touching his arm while cutting the grilled salmon. "Or when we spent that unforgettable weekend in the Florida Keys, photographing landscapes for your advertising campaign? The photos turned out beautiful. You still have them in your office." Each shared memory was like a small blade, cutting my confidence. Joel seemed uncomfortable, but he wasn't cutting her off as I desperately hoped he would. Each silence from him, each monosyllabic response, each time he checked his phone instead of participating in the conversation, was like a small dagger to my chest. And that time in New Orleans, when you gave me the shell necklace we found on the beach, Luna continued, touching a delicate necklace I hadn't noticed before. You said I was your personal mermaid. She smiled at me with false cordiality. Iran always been very romantic and creative with gifts. I'm sure you'll discover that soon, Layla. When Luna accidentally spilled red wine on my new purse, the one I had bought specifically for important events, and that represented 2 weeks of strict economy, Joel just murmured a distracted, careful, without even looking in my direction, too busy responding to messages on his phone. What a shame, said Luna with an expression of false concern. Red wine is so hard to remove, isn't it? Especially from light leather like your purse. Her words distilled poison disguised as sympathy. The worst came when the event presenter, an elegant man of about 60 with a professional announcer's voice, took the stage to announce the main sponsors of the night. I want to especially thank Joel McMillan, CEO of Essence Luxe, one of the largest beauty empires in the Southeast, whose generosity made this event possible, echoed throughout the entire hall. I felt as if the floor had literally opened under my feet. CEO, beauty empire. The man who had told me about his hobby of artisanal perfumes was, in fact, one of the most powerful businessmen in the region. All the attendees applauded respectfully, and I finally understood why people around us treated him with such deference. "Surprise!" Luna whispered maliciously in my ear, taking advantage of Joel greeting people at other tables. Our Joel is very modest about his business successes, but I'm sure you already knew that, didn't you? A smart and ambitious journalist like you certainly did her research before approaching him so strategically. Her words were like a precise punch to the stomach. All the intimate conversations we had had, all the moments of vulnerability we shared, all that chemistry I thought was genuine. Did Joel think I was only interested in his money and social status? Did I really seem like a calculated opportunist? I don't know what you're talking about, I managed to respond, trying to keep my voice steady. Of course you don't. Luna smiled with that poisonous smile some women master with mastery. It's just a coincidence that you're a journalist and he's one of the richest bachelors in Pensacola. Pure chance that you appeared in his life just when you're trying to boost your career. When Joel finally returned to the table, my eyes were already moist and my ability to pretend everything was fine had been completely exhausted. He tried to include me in the conversation, asking if I was enjoying the event, but I could only give monosyllabic responses. Layla, are you okay? He asked, finally noticing my discomfort. Before I could answer, Luna interjected, I think she's a little impressed by all this. It must be intimidating for someone who's not used to this type of environment. The condescension in her voice was the last straw. I abruptly stood up from the chair, mumbled an excuse about needing fresh air, and discreetly left the hall before tears began to fall publicly. In the elegant hotel ladies' room, I finally let the tears flow while trying to fix my smudged makeup. An elegant lady with grey hair offered me tissues with a maternal smile. Heart troubles, dear? She asked gently. Something like that, I replied, trying to smile through the tears. I think I deluded myself about some things. At my age, I've seen many situations like this, she said, touching up her own lipstick in the mirror. Sometimes people aren't who they seem to be, but sometimes we ourselves create stories in our heads that don't correspond to reality. I went home that night without saying goodbye to Joel, my heart broken into pieces too small to collect. Peaches received me with that feline expression of, I told you men are problematic, purring consolingly when I lay in bed still dressed, crying in silence. The next morning, I woke up with Peaches meowing insistently, her way of saying the food bowl was dangerously low, and my phone ringing non-stop. There were dozens of messages from Joel that I simply couldn't face at that moment. But then I saw a notification that made my blood literally freeze in my veins. The gossip portal, Pensacola Buzz, signed by Leonardo Matthews. Layla Carpenter, the opportunist journalist who conquered the heart and wallet of Essence Luxe's CEO, screamed the headline in bold and sensationalist letters. The article was devastatingly cruel. Leonardo had researched my entire life, discovering my financial situation, my freelance work, even the fact that I lived in a rented apartment downtown. Everything was molded to paint a portrait of a desperate and calculating woman who had approached Joel out of pure financial interest. Journalist Layla Carpenter, 27, known for her articles about local gastronomy, was seen in recent days in intimate company with Joel McMillan, CEO of Essence Lux, and one of the richest men in Florida, said the venomous text. Sources close to the couple reveal that Layla strategically approached the businessman during a gastronomic event, using her profession as a journalist to gain access to the privileged social circle. Worse still, there were photos of us at the workshop, on the food tour, always portraying me unfavorably as a calculating woman seducing a naive man. How the hell had Leonardo gotten these images? The difference in purchasing power between the two is glaring, the article continued. While Joel lives in a luxury penthouse valued at millions of dollars, Layla shares a small apartment with her cat in the downtown area of the city. The question remains, how far is an ambitious woman capable of going to change her life? My phone rang. It was Claire, her voice loaded with fury I rarely heard. "Layla, did you see this absurd and defamatory article?" she practically screamed. "Who is this Leonardo Matthews and how the hell did he get these intimate photos? This is invasion of privacy." I knew Leonardo. A frustrated 35-year-old journalist who worked for various sensationalist portals in the city always saw me as unfair competition at gastronomic events. He had tried to discredit me professionally several times before, but never with this calculated cruelty. "Claire, the photos—" My voice failed. "How did he get photos of us at Joel's workshop? No one else was there besides the three of us." "That's exactly what I'm going to find out," she said, with private detective determination. "Someone followed us, Layla. Someone hired a photographer to document you two together." During the next hours, which seemed to last entire weeks, my phone didn't stop ringing. Some journalist colleagues calling to offer support, others clearly fishing for information for their own articles. Clients cancelling future jobs, wary of associating with a questionable journalist. The worst was when my own family started calling. Ryan, my overprotective brother, was furious, not with me, but with the whole situation. "Layla, I want you to sue this Leonardo for defamation. This is inadmissible." Grandma Rose, at her dramatic 78 years, declared war. "Granddaughter, that woman who's making trouble is like that Cruella from the movie. I'm going to light a candle for St. Michael to fight for you." That's when Claire appeared at my apartment door, looking like a determined hurricane, carrying her professional camera and a folder full of papers. "Layla, you won't believe what I discovered," she said, her eyes shining with the satisfaction of someone who had just solved an important mystery. Leonardo was paid to write this article, and guess who was the source of the photos and information? She made a dramatic pause, worthy of prime-time soap opera. "Luna Carter. She hired a professional photographer to follow you during the food tour, and then at the workshop. I have the receipts, the contracts, everything documented." My world stopped completely. "How did you discover this?" "I know people in the field, Layla, and when someone messes with my best friend, I become a private investigator." Claire showed the documents. "Luna paid $10,000 for Leonardo to write this article destroying your reputation, and paid another $5,000 for the photographer who followed us." At that exact moment, as if the universe had perfect timing for dramatic situations, Joel appeared running on the street in front of my building. He was breathless, disheveled, holding a printed copy of the defamatory article, and his expression was one of pure fury, mixed with despair. "Layla!" he shouted from the sidewalk. "We need to talk urgently. I know who's behind all this lie, and I'm going to professionally destroy whoever dared attack you." "You don't need to defend me like I'm a helpless damsel in distress," I said coldly to Joel through my apartment window, crossing my arms in a pose that I hoped conveyed more dignity than I actually felt in that moment of broken heart. Maybe Leonardo is right. Maybe I really am a calculating opportunist who took advantage of a naive millionaire businessman. The words came out more bitter and self-destructive than I intended, but the pain of betrayal was still fresh, mixed with the public humiliation of seeing my professional reputation being destroyed in bold letters on Pensacola's social media. Joel ran his hand through his hair in desperation, completely messing up his always impeccable hairstyle. "Layla, please, do you really believe that? After everything we lived together in the past few days, after all the connection we built?" He took something crumpled from his shirt pocket. It was my original note, already yellowed from hours in his pocket, with the dried gardenia still stuck to the paper like a romantic bookmark. "You want to know the whole truth? This note you wrote at Mama Lou's kitchen reached me by complete mistake. The waiter confused the tables and delivered it to me by accident." My world stopped completely. I felt like I was watching a slow-motion movie where all the pieces finally fit together in a puzzle I didn't even know I was trying to solve. "I kept your words because they touched my heart before I even met you personally," continued Joel, his voice loaded with genuine emotion. "When we met at the food tour the next day, I felt as if the universe was confirming something I already knew deep in my soul. It was as if destiny had orchestrated our meeting through your own words." "That note was mine," I whispered, going down the stairs and opening the building door, taking the paper with trembling hands. "I wrote it to thank Mama Lou's chef for the most incredible dish I'd ever tasted in my life. How did it end up exactly with you?" "Pure cosmic coincidence," explained Joel, his honey eyes shining with growing hope. "The waiter got confused between table 5 and table 7. But Layla, even knowing it wasn't directed specifically at me, I felt there was something deeply special in those words, about magical moments and souls touched by food. And when I met you the next day, everything made perfect sense." He approached cautiously, as if I were an injured animal that might flee at any moment. "I lied about being just a cosmetics businessman because I desperately wanted you to know me for who I really am, not for what I have in the bank. I wanted our connection to be absolutely real, without interference from money or social status." Claire, who had listened to everything from my apartment window, shouted from above with the subtlety of an ambulance siren, "Layla, if you don't kiss this man right now, I'm coming down there and doing it for you. And then he'll post it on my Instagram." Joel laughed in that genuine way that made my heart completely melt, and I felt all the defenses I had built in the past 24 hours begin to crumble like a sandcastle at high tide. But before we could resolve our complicated emotional situation, Camilla appeared running down Government Street with elegance slightly compromised by the urgency of the situation. "Joel!" she shouted, trying to catch her breath. "Luna just arrived at the company with a team of lawyers. She's claiming she has legal right to share in the profits of the new perfume line because you two developed the initial idea together when you were still dating 2 years ago." Joel sighed heavily, passing his hands over his face with exhaustion. "She won't give up easily. Luna has always been persistent when she wants something, and apparently she's decided she wants me back along with my money." That's when I had an idea that sprouted in my mind with the force of a journalistic revelation. "Joel, do you trust me?" "Completely." He nodded without hesitating for even a second. "With my life." "Then let me handle this situation. I'm an investigative journalist, remember? I know how to discover the truth and how to deal with manipulative people like her." Joel looked at me with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "Layla, you don't need to expose yourself more for my sake. You've already suffered enough with this whole story." "It's not for your sake," I replied with growing determination, feeling the warrior journalist inside me fully awaken. "It's on principle. No one has the right to destroy other people's reputations with lies and manipulation." I spent the next 2 days immersed in the most important investigation of my career, with Claire as investigation partner, armed with cameras and strategic contacts. We began to methodically unravel the web of lies that Luna had constructed. We discovered that the Carter family was facing serious financial problems. Her luxury spa chain was rapidly losing clientele to more modern competitors, and she had taken out considerable loans using family properties as collateral. More importantly, I found evidence that she had used the same strategy of emotional blackmail and manipulation with at least 2 other wealthy ex-boyfriends from Pensacola. "Layla, look at this," said Claire, showing screenshots of conversations she had gotten through a disgruntled employee of Luna's company. "She not only paid Leonardo to write that article about you, but also tried to bribe other journalists to spread rumors about Joel being broke and desperate for a marriage of convenience." But the most shocking discovery came when I interviewed Sofia Rodriguez, Luna's former secretary, who had been summarily fired 2 weeks earlier. Sofia revealed to me that Luna had planned everything meticulously, from hiring the photographer to follow us to specifically choosing Leonardo Matthews because he had a personal rivalry with me. She said she was going to destroy that pretentious little journalist before she gets her claws into Joel, Sofia told me, with evident relief at finally being able to tell the truth. Luna was obsessed with the idea of winning Joel back, not out of love, but because she couldn't stand seeing him happy with someone else. The final confrontation was carefully orchestrated. The chosen event was the launch of the new Gulf Essence perfume line from Essence Luxe, which would take place at the elegant Pensacola Grand Hotel with all the local press and Pensacola's business elite present. Joel had tried to dissuade me. "Layla, you don't need to do this publicly. We can resolve everything in court." "No, Joel. She destroyed my reputation publicly, so she's going to be unmasked publicly too," I replied with unshakable determination. "Besides, your company and your family deserve to know exactly who Luna Carter is." On the night of the event, I arrived accompanied by Claire and armed with a folder containing all the evidence we had collected. I wore a red dress I had borrowed from my cousin. I wanted to be impeccable for my final performance. Luna appeared triumphant like a peacock, wearing a golden dress that cost more than my annual salary and a victorious smile that would soon become a nightmare. She had brought her own team of lawyers and even some journalists who were clearly expecting more drama for their headlines. Joel was nervous, but tried to maintain professional composure while officially presenting his new line of perfumes inspired by Gulf Coast aromas. When the time came for questions from the press, Luna stood up theatrically. "Joel, darling," she said, with a honeyed voice that carried poorly disguised venom, "I'd like you to publicly clarify about our partnership in creating this perfume line. After all, we developed several of the fragrances together when we were still intimate." The silence in the hall was deafening. Everyone present, businessmen, journalists, photographers, influencers, waited for Joel's response, clearly expecting the promised drama. That's when I stood up, walking to the small stage with my heart racing but firm voice. "Excuse me," I said, taking the microphone from the surprised presenter's hands. "Before Joel answers this question, I think everyone here deserves to know the whole truth about Luna Carter." Luna immediately paled, but tried to maintain her confident smile. "I don't know who you are or why you're interrupting." "I'm Layla Carpenter, investigative journalist," I replied, opening my evidence folder. "And I spent the past 2 days investigating your recent activities, Luna." I began methodically presenting all the evidence: the receipts for payments to Leonardo Matthews, the contracts with the photographer who had followed us, the screenshots of conversations where she planned to destroy the pretentious little journalist, and statements from former employees about her manipulative tactics. Luna Carter hired a paparazzi to photograph Joel and me without our knowledge or consent, I explained to the stunned audience. Then paid $10,000 for an unethical journalist to publish lies about me, all because she can't accept that Joel McMillan chose to move on with his life. The murmur in the hall was growing. Luna tried to defend herself, but her voice came out trembling. "These are all lies. She's trying to defame me. I have here the documents that prove each accusation," I continued, showing the evidence to the cameras present. "But you know what impresses me most, Luna? You completely underestimated the power of a woman who fights for the things she believes in, who doesn't let herself be intimidated by manipulation, and who has loyal friends willing to seek the truth. Joel took the stage at that moment, standing by my side in a public demonstration of support that made my heart race. "Layla is absolutely right," he said, taking my hand. "And I want to make it clear to everyone here that Luna Carter had no participation in developing this perfume line. Our professional collaboration ended over 2 years ago, along with our personal relationship." He picked up a small, elegant bottle from the display table. "That's why I named our main new fragrance Destiny, in honor of the magical chance that made me find Layla through a lost note that reached me by mistake but changed my life forever." The silence in the hall transformed into surprised murmurs, and then into genuine applause. Luna, completely unmasked and humiliated, left the event followed by her embarrassed lawyers, while several journalists ran after her for comments. Leonardo Matthews, who was present covering the event for his sensationalist portal, was immediately fired the next day when his editor discovered he had accepted payment to publish false articles. That night, after all the guests had left and the staff finished cleaning the hall, Joel and I were alone on the hotel balcony, watching the lights of Pensacola reflected in the dark Gulf. "Layla," he said, pulling me closer, "thank you for fighting for us, for not giving up even when everything seemed lost." "I needed to do this," I replied, resting my head on his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Not just for us, but because some battles need to be fought on principle." "I have a confession to make," said Joel, pulling away slightly to look into my eyes. "Even before discovering the note was yours, I already knew I was in love with you. It was the moment you laughed at my red face after the jalapeno pepper that I realized I wanted to spend the rest of my life making you laugh like that." "Joel McMillan," I replied, feeling tears of joy forming in my eyes. "You realize you just gave me the best love story a journalist could dream of living." He kissed me then, long and deeply, while the Gulf breeze blew our hair and carried the perfume of gardenia that had become our personal fragrance. 3 weeks later, Joel took me back to Mama Lou's kitchen, the place where it all began without us knowing. The small colonial house was decorated with Mardi Gras lights, since we were approaching the Pensacola Mardi Gras season. "I have a very important question for you," he said, kneeling in the middle of the small family restaurant, while Mama Lou, the other customers, and even some curious people from the street watched emotionally through the window. "Layla Carpenter," he continued, taking from his pocket a simple but beautiful ring with a blue stone that reminded me of the color of the Gulf of Pensacola. "Will you accept to write with me the continuation of this love story that began with a lost note? Will you be my partner in culinary adventures, in perfume creation for life?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation, while Mama Lou cried emotionally and the other customers applauded. "But only if you promise not to lie about your profession anymore." "I solemnly promise," he laughed, putting the ring on my finger. "But I can't guarantee I won't fall even more in love with you with every dish we taste together for the rest of our lives." And that's how our true love story was born, from a cosmic misunderstanding, survived manipulations and lies, and became the most delicious and aromatic adventure of our lives. Epilogue. 1 year later, I was sitting on the porch of our house in Gulf Shores, our weekend house, as Joel insisted on calling it, where we could just be Layla and Joel, away from the constant spotlights of business life in Pensacola. The property was a perfect refuge, a renovated colonial house with a view of the white sand dunes that changed shape with the wind, surrounded by crystal-clear lagoons that looked like mirrors of the sky. Peaches and Duke had become the most unlikely best friends in the universe, she majestic and temperamental, graciously allowing the French bulldog to sleep in her favorite bed, while he followed her around the house like a furry and devoted bodyguard. The dynamic between the two was hilarious. Peaches pretended to tolerate Duke with feline dignity, but I had already caught her several times lovingly cleaning his ears when she thought no one was looking. My book Unlikely Encounters, How Destiny Unites Hearts Through Food, had just been accepted by an important national publisher, with our story proudly occupying the main chapter. The Destiny perfume line had become an absolute success, not only in the United States, but also in Canada and France, where European consumers fell in love with the exotic fragrances inspired by the Gulf Coast. I had become the official food columnist for Southern Flavors magazine, with a monthly section called Encounters at the Table, where I documented love stories born around food. My professional credibility had not only been restored after the scandal with Leonardo and Luna, but had grown exponentially. Apparently, the public loved a journalist who faced adversity and emerged victorious. "You know what I'm thinking?" said Joel, interrupting my writing and offering me a glass of chilled rosé wine, our official drink for contemplative late afternoons. "If it weren't for that confused waiter who delivered your note to the wrong table, maybe we would never have met. Or maybe destiny would have found another equally dramatic way," I replied, saving my document and comfortably leaning against his chest. After all, we were destined to share the same food tour the next day. "And you know how Grandma Rose always says, love that's meant to be always finds its way to arrive." Speaking of Grandma Rose, she had become a romantic celebrity at 78 when she reunited with her first love, Sebastian, who turned out to be none other than Joel's grandfather. The discovery had happened during our civil wedding, when the two recognized each other instantly at the ceremony, causing one of the most emotional and cinematic moments of our lives. "Rose! Rose Miller!" old Sebastian had shouted, standing up from his chair with impressive agility for his 82 years. "You're the Rose who danced with me at the 1963 Mardi Gras party. Sebastian Macmillan, you rascal!" she had responded, running toward him with tears in her eyes. "I spent 60 years thinking about you." We discovered then that they had fallen madly in love in their youth, but were separated by families who didn't approve of the courtship. Sebastian was sent to study in Atlanta. Rose married my grandfather under family pressure, and both spent their entire lives thinking the great love had remained in the past. Now they were officially dating, with the romantic intensity of teenagers and the wisdom of those who know the value of time. Grandma Rose had moved to an apartment near Sebastian's, and the two spent their days cooking together, exchanging memories, and planning the trips they never could take in their youth. Claire and Dr. Vincent had also found their own unexpected happy ending. They married in a hilarious ceremony where he recited poems about Gulf Coast medicinal plants as wedding vows, while she photographed him in dramatic poses inspired by old romantic book covers. Their honeymoon was a photographic expedition through Louisiana, documenting traditional culinary ingredients, the perfect combination of their adventurous personalities. "Layla," said Joel, kissing the top of my head, "you're very quiet today. Is everything okay?" "Just reflecting on how our life changed completely in 1 year," I replied, spinning my wedding ring, which had become my lucky charm for important interviews. "A year ago, I was a freelance journalist struggling to pay rent, and you were a lonely businessman who lied about his profession to meet real women. And now we're a family," he completed, petting Duke, who had just arrived on the porch, carrying one of Peach's slippers in his mouth, his new way of showing affection for the princess cat who had finally accepted sharing the kingdom with him. Our official wedding had been celebrated last June, during Pensacola's summer festival season, at a party that mixed local tradition with modern elegance. We held the ceremony at historic Christchurch downtown, followed by a reception at the Pensacola Country Club that Joel had managed to reserve through his business contacts. But the most emotional moment was when we danced our first song as husband and wife, At Last by Etta James, while fireworks lit up Pensacola's sky and a jazz band played in the background. Luna had completely disappeared from our lives after the public scandal. According to rumors that reached us through Camilla, she had moved to Miami, trying to rebuild her life away from the judgmental looks of Pensacola. I had reached the point of feeling sorry for her. After all, we discovered that her manipulation was born from fear of loneliness and family pressure to marry well. Leonardo Matthews never managed to work in respectable journalism again. Last we heard, he was selling car insurance. "Joel," I said, turning to face him with the serious expression he had already learned to recognize as a prelude to important conversation. "I have news for you." "Good or concerning?" he asked, raising an eyebrow with that sideways smile that still made me melt after a year of marriage. "Depends on how you feel about having another member in the family," I replied mysteriously, gently placing his hand on my still flat belly. Joel needed a few seconds to process the information. When he finally understood, his honey-colored eyes filled with tears of pure joy. "Layla, are you saying that—" "I'm 8 weeks pregnant," I confirmed, laughing at the expression of absolute shock on his face. "And before you ask, yes, I've already told Peaches and Duke." She reacted with typical feline indifference. He tried to lick my belly as if he already knew there's a small human growing there. Joel picked me up and spun me around the porch, laughing and crying at the same time, while Duke barked animatedly and Peaches observed our euphoria with that feline expression of superiority that clearly said, "Humans are such dramatic creatures." "Layla Carpenter Macmillan," he said, carefully putting me down and kissing my forehead, my cheeks, my lips. "You just gave me the most wonderful news of my entire life. Our baby will grow up hearing stories about how their parents met through a lost note and a food tour. And will taste the best Gulf Coast dishes from early on," I added, "because I'm not going to stop working just because I'm expecting a baby. This child will be born with a refined palate for regional cuisine." That night, lying in our bed with a view of the interior stars, much brighter than those in the city, we talked about names, about what it would be like to raise our child between the crystal lagoons of Gulf Shores and the historic streets of Pensacola, about how we would teach our child to value both the simplicity of a well-seasoned dish and the sophistication of an artisanal fragrance. "If it's a girl, how about Hope?" suggested Joel, caressing my still imperceptible belly. "Because of the hope you brought to my life when I had already given up finding true love." "If it's a boy, Sebastian," I replied without hesitation, "in honor of your grandfather, who connected us through generations without even knowing." 6 months later, we discovered it would be a girl. Hope Carpenter Macmillan was born on a rainy December dawn, weighing 7 pounds and 2 ounces, with almond eyes like mine, and dark hair that promised to be rebellious like her father's. Duke fell madly in love with the baby from the first day, assuming the role of official bodyguard, while Peaches observed her with that feline patience reserved for cubs who haven't learned to properly bother yet. Grandma Rose and Sebastian took turns as official babysitters, filling our daughter with stories about the old times and teaching nursery rhymes they had learned in their own childhood. It was moving to see how love had connected our families so naturally and profoundly. "You know," said Joel one Sunday morning, while we watched Hope sleeping in the artisanal crib he had commissioned from a local carpenter, "sometimes I'm afraid of waking up and discovering that all this was a very elaborate dream." "It wasn't a dream," I replied, kissing his bare shoulder while admiring our perfect daughter. "It was destiny, pure and simple destiny, orchestrated by a distracted waiter and a lost note that found exactly the right person." Essence Luxe had expanded internationally with absolute success. The Destiny line was sold in exclusive boutiques in Paris, Rome, and New York, always accompanied by the romantic story of its creation. Joel had opened a second laboratory in California, finally realizing his dream of taking Gulf Coast fragrances to the international market. I continued writing for Southern Flavors, now with a special section on cuisine and motherhood, documenting how different cultures around the world celebrate the arrival of babies through food. My book had been translated into Spanish and Portuguese, winning contemporary romantic literature awards I never dreamed of receiving. But our greatest achievement remained simple. We had built solid love, based on mutual admiration, respect, and chemistry that only grew with time. Joel still made me laugh until my belly hurt. I still made him blush when I praised his perfumes, and we both still discovered new things about each other with every conversation. "Layla," he said one particularly golden afternoon, while Hope played on the rug with Duke and Peaches supervised from afar. Do you remember what Dr. Vincent said on our first food tour? That Gulf Coast cuisine is like an epic romance. Sweet, spicy, and always leaving you wanting more? Exactly. And I think our life became exactly that, an epic romance, seasoned with love, humor, some necessary drama, and always with the taste of wanting more. I got up from the armchair where I was nursing Hope and went to the shelf where we kept our most precious treasures. I picked up a simple frame that contained our original note, now yellowed and delicate, with the dried gardenia still stuck like an old jewel. "Sometimes I still can't believe it all started with this," I said, showing the paper to our daughter, who was obviously more interested in trying to grab Duke's hair. "A cosmic misunderstanding that became the best love story we ever lived. The best misunderstanding in the history of humanity," agreed Joel, kissing my forehead and then Hope's head. "And look what it gave us. A family, a thriving company, 2 pets who love each other but pretend to tolerate each other, and the certainty that sometimes destiny really knows what it's doing. When the sun set that perfect afternoon, painting the Gulf Shore's sky with all the colors of the rainbow, I snuggled on the sofa between my husband and my daughter, with Duke at our feet and Peaches purring on the back, and I thought that some love stories really deserve to be eternal. Our journey had begun with a lost note, a disastrous food tour, and 2 hearts that didn't know they were looking for each other. But it became a symphony of flavors, aromas, laughter, tears, overcoming and mainly love. Lots of true love. And every time someone asks me what the secret of a happy relationship is, I always answer the same thing. Leave a note with flowers for someone who deserves it. You never know who the universe will choose to find it.